All right, let's do a quick sound test here. See if the issue persists. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you guys hear me? All right. Finally, sounds good now. All right, there we go. So I'm gonna mute that. Mute that. All right, great, fantastic. So, welcome back, everybody. Sorry about the first time. I had some really terrible issues with my computer, so nonetheless, it's figured out now. I want to give it a little bit for people to join in. Welcome. If you haven't seen this channel before, subscribe. If you're interested in this whole topic, do make sure to leave a like. And I'm going to talk about the case against the Riverside County Sheriff's Department today and their withholding of routine police records, namely the police report and the call logs pertaining to a wrongful death of a woman by the name of Stacy Meyer over in the Riverside County area. If you don't know who Stacy is, she is the daughter of the infamous Kendrick Moxon, who is the captive lawyer for Scientology. He's very infamous for a wide variety of targeted lawfare, harassing anybody that dares criticize Scientology with frivolous suits, even smear campaigns. There was a 60 Minutes piece a couple of years ago where he sent out a whole smear campaign against one of the members of who were petitioning the suit against Lisa McPherson of the Lisa McPherson Trust. So this is the case that we're going to talk about today, and I just wanted to clear up some things so that people have a better understanding of what the lawsuit is about, what it isn't, and some background that they might not have before. So I'm just going to give it a little bit, maybe another minute here for people to join in. Welcome, everybody. I can't see everybody's chat. It would just be way too much for me to get to, but if you do have questions at the end, I'll go ahead and take a look, and I'll take them and answer as best as I can. I'll see who else we have. See if we might have any questions so far before we start. All right. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started then. So to take a step back, what are we talking about here today? We are talking about a civil lawsuit that I filed against the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for the withholding of routine public records pertaining to a public records request I made to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department pertaining to the death of a woman named Stacy Meyer, otherwise known as the daughter of infamous Scientology lawyer Kendrick Moxon. The particular request I made was under the California Public Records Act. So Riverside County is in the state of California, and the location of Stacy's last known whereabouts is where she has been alleged to have died, and that has been at a location called the Scientology Gold Base, located out in Hemet. That is also where the large compound where they have the little OT-8 ship out by, as well as the productions, the Golden Era production studio where they make a lot of the propaganda, is also located out by. And that is the last known whereabouts of Stacy, where she has been, the official narrative anyway, has been declared that she died as a result of some routine maintenance, by which then she, by sheer accident, fell onto a electric fence and sadly ending her time here on this earth and passing away. So that's the official narrative. And I want to give and explain the background and context of exactly what I have going on with this lawsuit, some of the background history and information pertaining to Stacy Grove Meyer herself, as well as the location of where she died, and some of the other before history, before she actually passed away, and sort of set the scene for everything. So, with that being said, I'll go ahead and explain. It might be a little boring at times, some of the technical things pertaining to how the lawsuit works, what it is and what it isn't. And like I said, at the end, we'll get to some Q&A that people might have. So first and foremost, what is this case about? Well, the case is what's called a writ of mandate. Basically, when you make a public records request in the state of California, there are state laws that govern the releasing and exemptions of those records. If you make a public records inquiry to a government agency, which is what the CPRA, as it's also known, the California Public Records Act, it dictates the ways in which a government agency is supposed to behave when you make a public records request. The timeline that they have to respond back to you, and if they make a particular finding or conclusion, then there is a set of expectations that they are supposed to adhere by to address your request. I made a public records request to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department specifically for the police report and the dispatch call log and notes for the death of Stacy Grove Meyer. And the reason why I made it over in Riverside County is because of the location and jurisdiction of where the death occurred and which law enforcement agency actually has authority over it. The location of Gold Base out by San Jacinto and Hemet is actually an unincorporated area, and as such, it falls under the jurisdiction and authority of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. And so that is why, pertaining to this incident, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department sent over its deputies to handle this incident. Those are the law enforcement deputies that handle matters of law enforcement in Riverside, in this particular spot. So that explains that. The background to this is that, again, Stacy Grove Meyer is the daughter of Kendrick Moxon, an infamous Scientology lawyer. Not only that, but Kendrick, his wife, both of them were very high level and still are higher level Scientologists, and know pretty much all of the activities and operations of Scientology. Kendrick Moxon is very well known for representing Scientology and launching frivolous lawsuits, harassing its critics. And much of the information we have, not only about Kendrick Moxon, but also the location where Stacy died, Gold Base, we have, thanks to books and other public testimony of people that are survivors of Scientology. Some of those people include Laura Anderson, who grew up there herself and actually has direct firsthand knowledge of Stacy, knew Stacy very well as Stacy's father. We have the Headleys, who published an entire book about it and had talked about the location of Gold Base quite a bit. We have a testimony that details her escape from Scientology from the Gold Base location. And those are just some of the people that come to my mind right now pertaining to the living conditions, environment, overall, what Gold Base is and how things are run over there by Scientology. What we also know is that the official narrative given by law enforcement pertaining to Stacy's death does not match up with people that actually have firsthand knowledge of how gold base works, as well as knew of Stacy and her father directly, personally, and are still alive to this day. The official narrative that has been widely published is that Stacy died as a result of sheer accident and coincidence and happenstance of performing routine maintenance duties while at the gold base location, and she tripped and fell on a 7200 volt electric wire fence and basically died almost immediately. That is the official story. What we don't really know at this point is a couple of things. We don't know where specifically she died. We don't know at what time the law enforcement agency, in this case Riverside Sheriff's Department, was notified. We do know, thanks to part of the information released by Riverside County Sheriff's Department after I asked them, we do know, if you take a look at the lawsuit, we do know the names of the deputies who responded to that scene. And I want to fill in some additional gaps about how this type of lawsuit actually works. So when you make a public records request to a government agency in the state of California, they have a certain period they're supposed to respond to you by. If they deny a release of a record, you can appeal it. Even after you appeal their decision on something, and if they still do not release what you believe to be rightfully public records, in this case, absolutely, it is public record. These are routine records that I've requested all across the country for all of the various other matters before. The records I requested specifically just included the police report by the deputies that responded on the scene, as well as the call logs and dispatch notes for when that call to service was made to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. So just like any other law enforcement agency, when there is some sort of incident that takes place, it is reported to dispatch. It is not always the case that a call is made. Sometimes a deputy might be having a conversation with somebody physically at a location, and somebody will give them some information about a call to service, and they can respond that way. Or the other way is, of course, a call is made to dispatch by dialing 911 or by dialing the specific base of the department and getting a law enforcement officer out there. So those are the ways that a call to service is generated. The non-official ways, which are highly suspect and shady, is when specific officers are privately contacted based on the personal phone numbers that somebody will have of those officers to come out to a scene. And we've seen that before repeatedly, especially in LA, where individual LAPD officers are actually contacted via their private phones by members of Scientology. And this happens all across Los Angeles government, not just LAPD, but even other city government officials. And the reason for doing this is always to skirt around public records laws, because those personal cell phones that officers have, at least what they believe anyway, little do they know that when you conduct official business, even on your personal phone, those records are still in fact public records. Just because they're using their personal device does not automatically mean any of those conversations are exempt, but it is unfortunately a very common tactic to deter newspaper agencies, reporters, journalists, and so forth from obtaining this information, which is rightfully so a matter of public record. So that's the stage of how a incident gets generated. In my back and forth with Riverside County Sheriff's Department, it was very clear from the get-go that they were incredibly hostile and very, very much dug their heels into not reporting what happened, not releasing those records. So they were citing completely irrelevant exemptions. They cited exemptions to withholding the police report, but SB 1421 is specific to an officer firing a gun. And that, first of all, they're saying we are keeping it because it is not a SB 1421 event. SB 1421, in fact, does not apply an exemption to keeping the record. It specifically actually mandates when there's an incident involving officer-involved shooting, they have to release details of the incident. And so it was bizarre to me that they even cited it as an exemption, thinking that I was just going to step away. Another thing they cited is that they were claiming that I was seeking private and personal health records of Stacy Grove Meyer, which is extremely bizarre to me because, first of all, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is not, this is not even a HIPAA matter, but they are also not a provider of such services. So to even cite that, despite me explicitly clarifying in writing that I was not even looking for private, personal medical records of Stacy, it was exceptionally bizarre. When you read the actual request itself, it's very clear. All I requested were routine police records, namely the report of the incident generated from the responding deputies and the dispatch call logs and call notes. Very, very common. Those are routine records. And frankly, I've even had a good outcome when I've requested those records from agencies like LAPD. Despite my very strong dislike of LAPD, even they have been very forthcoming to providing me copies of police reports. And the way that law enforcement agencies do this is very simple. They will simply redact. They will redact the name of the person that made the report and their contact information. Basically, personal information will be redacted from the police report, and the rest they will give to you. That is typical. That is to be expected, and I've rarely actually had difficulty obtaining it, even after you run into the usual bureaucratic nonsense of they push the date out and delay. Even with agencies like LAPD, I've had positive experiences, and I've done this with NYPD, Boston PD, Salt Lake City PD. I've even done it with Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and I honestly have not experienced much pushback. In vast majority of the time, they will release those records in redacted form. They will not just outright withhold them. And so for this case, though, in Riverside, they completely withheld the entire police report outright. And they were citing exemptions. And exemptions are applied to records that exist. And so what that tells me is they have these records, these police reports of what happened that day when these deputies responded to her death. And they have the dispatch notes and call logs of who placed the call and at what time a call was placed pertaining to this incident. And that is what this lawsuit fundamentally is about. It is not to litigate negligence. It is not to litigate money damages against. People fundamentally were confusing the two. The only people that can actually do that would be Stacy's family. But who is Stacy's family? Stacy's family is none other than Kendrick Moxon. Kendrick Moxon, his entire life has been a devout member and servant to this criminal organization. He will never litigate or go against the criminal organization to which he is a part of. So have the rest of her family members. And the testimony given by people that have escaped and people that actually knew Stacy is very clear as to what they believe, and I find it compelling enough to believe as well that what was happening is Stacy had a lot of pertinent information to outing much of the criminal acts being committed by Scientology, especially her father, who at the time was also known thanks to testimony by many other people, such as Laura, who were right there beside him as they were young, to let us know that Stacy had doubts. She had firsthand knowledge of Scientology's criminal acts and doubts of the belief in Scientology, and wanted to leave and escape. And we know for sure that this criminal organization has explicit written policies on how to harass, threaten, and intimidate, and otherwise literally explicitly destroy anybody that has damning information against them. And so based on what I've heard in the conversations I've had from people who have firsthand knowledge and many other such public testimony against the criminal organization of Scientology pertaining to the death of Stacy, I am convinced from this compelling evidence that there was much more to the story than what the narrative given by the government was, which is she died due to some routine maintenance work, and that just doesn't sit right with me. What I believe more likely happened is that she was coerced, she was held under duress, and that she was pressured and basically held against her will from leaving and reporting to authorities information and evidence about the criminal acts of Scientology, and her father, being the high-level member that he is of this organization, absolutely would have known about what was happening. And the sad part is, when you take a look at her life, none of this information is out in public as far as what actually happened that day. That information is held within police reports and those call logs. Those are records that we can utilize to have a better understanding of what might have actually transpired. And I want to explain a little bit more about information that is and is not in those records. When it comes to field deputies that respond to a call to service, field deputies do not actually have authority and jurisdiction over a body. What actually happens, and I've talked to many Riverside and LA County law enforcement officers about this, field officers are only there to preserve the scene, make sure that nobody gets inside of the crime scene, and only to make visual inspection detailed notes on their reports. They are not authorized, nor do they have the skill set to conduct any sort of medical analysis or conclusions as to what happened. That is the coroner's jurisdiction and authority and expertise. All they're supposed to do is just preserve the scene so that the coroners and wait basically until the coroners come and take over. And what I find even more interesting is that even at the time that Stacy was declared dead, her death certificate by the Riverside County Sheriff's Office was a whole nother war that the Sheriff's Department was waging to withhold from people. It was only after a lot of public pressure that the death certificate pertaining to her death was even released. And so you can imagine, you have clearly this act of, an incredibly tragic act, and a government agency is withholding her death certificate. But not only that, there was many cries even at that time to release many of this information that I'm battling for today. The police report, the call logs and notes from dispatch as to what happened that day. All we know is only the names of the deputies. We don't know when those deputies were contacted. We don't know when they were told by dispatch. We don't know why specifically those deputies. Were they just close to that scene? Did they have any sort of connection to Scientology or Stacy or Kendrick Moxon or anybody else? We have no idea, and only these records will give us some definitive way to help bring in more context to the situation. So that's ultimately what this case is about. It is specifically just battling the bogus exemptions and bogus claims made by the sheriff's department to withhold those records, which again are very routine public records that I rarely actually have issues with, even from much more larger and much more bureaucratic and political law enforcement agencies, and the fact that they withheld them entirely. But not only that, another good point to be made is we actually don't know at the time of her death, was it the field deputies that handled her body and transported it to the coroner's office? And if so, why would they authorize such a thing? That is another piece of information that can be obtained through the police reports. It could be the case that maybe they were short-staffed or various other factors. Who were those deputies speaking to as representatives from Scientology on that day? We don't know. That information is contained in those reports. And it's no coincidence also that shortly after I filed this suit, less than 48 hours later, material witnesses that know exactly the situation and the environment inside Gold Base and actually have firsthand experience and knew of Stacy and her father, Laura was harassed at work and got fired. Within 48 hours of this suit's filing, she was fired. That is just too damn coincidental for me to accept. That is just sheer happenstance, sheer luck of the draw. And why I say that is because when you take a look at not only their fair gaming policy, but when you take a look at their circumstances of how Laura has been and many other victims of Scientology have been treated, Laura has been harassed by Scientology for years. It is not anything new. But why and how interesting of all the times now that they ramp up that harassment to the point that they target her job. They have known for years, and Laura has held this job for quite a long time, where she's worked. And why of all the times now to go so hard against Laura as to get her fired? It is too damn coincidental for me to just simply accept that is sheer happenstance for her to have to go through this horrific moment, not only of being a survivor, but losing her livelihood. Losing her livelihood over the fact that she knows Stacy, she knows exactly what happens at Hemet Gold Base, and very few living members actually have firsthand knowledge of Stacy, the subject of this public records request. That is what we're dealing and up against. I have yet to receive a reply from Riverside County Sheriff. At this point, they have been successfully served. And what happens is the county gets to make a reply and oppose my filing. And then that gets to be heard and see whether the arguments they're making against my claims are legitimate or have any compelling backbone to them or not. And so that's the state of this lawsuit in particular. I've outlined quite a different number of points, but you can see why this is so critical. And I want to outline and I want to address one other really important aspect about this too. When people talk about, why haven't people who have been survivors done more? Why haven't they, why haven't they basically fought more for justice for people like Stacy as they might have done for people like Lisa McPherson? You have to understand, especially in this case, the family members of Stacy are all extremely high level Scientologists who hold the highest of highest positions and are very clearly and deeply involved with much of the crime. And Stacy, unfortunately, was an incredibly tragic incident of where somebody who clearly had doubts despite being forcibly dragged into this life, into the horrific treatment that is Scientology, and we know for a fact how they treat children, regardless of whether you have the Miscavige name or whether you have familial ties to other high-ranking leaders like Moxon. It's the fact that by just the way that Scientology operates and the way that they treat and view children will not save you, regardless of who your family ties are. None of her family members had any sort of incentives to come to her help, especially given the fact of their power and access to resources. That is ultimately why over 2 decades now, it's been over 25 years that her case has gone completely cold and no justice has been provided for Stacy. The only people that could actually sue for damages against Scientology regarding her Stacy's death is Stacy's family. And we know, based on their level of power and position, they are not going to do that. That is just not going to happen. And so ultimately, that is why her case is so tragic, so heartbreaking, of where a young woman at just the young age of 20 was taken from this world. And there's just so much lack of transparency regarding how she passed, and the testimony we have of survivors that have firsthand knowledge of her and of the environment that she was held in is compelling for me to believe that her death was not just sheer happenstance. There's too many factors at play that we know that give far more than reasonable doubt to just simply accept the regurgitated official narrative. We have an OSHA official actually going to Scientology and issuing a fine for clear safety violations. Now, in that report, OSHA at that time did not conclusively state that Scientology killed her, but they said there is cause for concern and there are major safety violations and considerations. We have the fact that there was and I'll actually scroll over to the introduction part here. We have the fact that there was actually a county official who was harassing protesters around Gold Base by issuing frivolous, bogus ordinances to put around a barrier and distance that people had to stand away from the Gold Base to protest. And it was also found out this county official was taking political campaign contributions from Scientology. We have video from protesters at that time who were also getting harassed and intimidated by the very same sheriff's department. We also have video of Scientology literally setting up audio warfare. They had these giant music concert grade speakers that they were blasting music onto protesters to get them away from the building. And the people who were protesting at this time was when the whole anonymous group had come by and really laid a stake to make sure that people knew what was going on. And thanks to much of those records, we can see that there's clear planning and clear conspiracy to keep people away from the site of where Stacy Grove Meyer ultimately tragically passed. And so despite all of that, right, it is not a coincidence that this particular lawsuit came at this time. We have lots of different survivors, whether they grew up inside Scientology as kids and are now adults and coming forward with their stories, or people that have been impacted due to the collusion of Scientology with government agencies that help enable their their criminality and have been impacted as a result of that, like myself, we have people seeking justice and seeking to hold this criminal enterprise lawfully accountable. And that pressure has ultimately resulted in the best time to push forward this suit because there's so much call and public call for accountability and justice to be delivered. There is a added look back window in California for sexual abuse survivors that are adults now and want to get justice for what happened to them by the hands of Scientology and its affiliates. It is not a coincidence at all. And in my eyes, this is the perfect time to apply this pressure to the judicial system because there's so many people coming forward and seeking justice. And I welcome anybody, especially the survivors, who actually want, in good faith, to make sure that this case succeeds, to come to the first hearing, which is stated for Monday, December 8th of this year. So Monday, December 8th is the first hearing on this matter, and anybody that has good intention and wants to see this case succeed, to actually come to Riverside. It's at the Riverside County Historic Superior Courthouse, and make your presence known, because that physical presence does matter. When you show up, just like the support that people have given to other cases like the victims of Danny Masterson, as well as Valerie Haney, who again went through some horrific abuse at the hands of Scientology. Those are how not only you make your voices heard, but you make it clear to the court that this is not just a routine matter to be chewed up by the system, spit out, and completely forgotten and disregarded. This is a death that we're talking about, and there is far, far more compelling evidence to suggest that there was some foul play. And that necessitates the releasing of these records, and that these records are being unlawfully withheld over completely bogus and frivolous exemptions, and that moreover, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department knows that these exemptions and that these tactics to withhold this information is deliberate and as a means to scare away anybody from following through and seeing it to the end. Even if, I want to point this out too, even if in the end I say I'm unable to get the records released, the best part of this suit is that I'll be able to have official representatives from the Sheriff's Department as well as the county on record to why they're withholding and what the ruling is for withholding those records, despite the very convincing arguments and a lot of the efforts I put into gathering the evidence as shown in the suit. Despite that showing, the release is the only logical and lawful conclusion at the end of this. And so if you haven't read the actual suit itself, it's actually quite short. I wanted to keep it deliberately that short. And you can read it. I made a post on my YouTube as well as on Twitter, and you can see the article, the lawsuit there for yourself. Future filings I'll also make publicly available, and post that as well. But that is the state in the whole background for what led up to this lawsuit. I personally, frankly, got incredibly frustrated that despite having positive experiences, as much as it pains me to say that, with LAPD and LASD and Salt Lake City PD for these routine records, I was actually shocked that Riverside County went to this whole ordeal to withhold these records. I mean, that ultimately, and the fact that justice for Stacy is very long overdue, is really what drove me to file this and have this battle. It's very much needed. I welcome any and all and appreciate your support. And I hope to see, especially those that are survivors and have firsthand experience of Gold Base and of Stacy, I hope to see you there at the first hearing and subsequent hearings. The last thing I wanted to address before I take questions is I want to talk about some of the bigger theme here of really community support and getting justice, and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like. And I want to address probably the most recent series of incidents that have happened, and they pertain to this community. Now, I joined this particular movement specifically because I was looking for information and ways to expose government corruption. There was a lot of players at hand, and I wanted to actually see if I could catch directly, one-to-one, government officials in LA to doing political favors and bidding that would completely step out of their field of qualified immunity and catch them in the act. I am happy that I got to this point, especially with a lot of your support. And there's 5 LAPD officers for sure that I verifiably know for a fact that were acting in such a way. And then, of course, the biggest fish of them all is that you have a sitting city attorney who admitted, and on a recording nonetheless, that she is in fact doing political favors outside the bounds of her qualified immunity for this criminal enterprise. And so to that front, mission accomplished. As far as supporting people, the way that you take down any criminal organization is you help, on one end, make sure that the victims who have been victimized actually make reports, because those stories and the information and evidence they have are critical to taking down their criminal enterprise. I've seen quite a number of people, either through not supporting, meaning indifference, or by means of actively putting them down, dissuading these victims from doing just that. And that not only is that incredibly frustrating and frankly disgusting, but doing so ensures that you will never actually make sure that this organization is held accountable. I'll give you just a recent example. You don't have to agree with somebody or their opinions or perspective, or even like them for that matter, to help and aid and make sure that you give support to that person. In the case of Nora and the years of harassment that she's endured prior to any of the involvement that many people have had in helping make sure that a very recent guy by the name of Anthony D'Amato gets justice and held accountable, the abuse that Nora and many other victims, like Liz Gale and others, have suffered at the hands of this guy. That level of abuse and pattern can only exist when victims are not supported, and that is by and large how those types of incidents are allowed to get away with it for so long. It was not until very recently, in the past year and a half, that people banded together to help recent victims hold this guy accountable. And that is the reason why he's seeing justice today, and those victims are getting justice today. There's been people like Nora, though, who have been the receivers of that abuse, and not only by people like Anthony, but others who have targeted critics of Scientology, and especially those that grew up in it as kids and are now adults. The only reason that the biggest reason that those people haven't come out is because there has not been support for them. By and large, we know that people have been victimized. You don't need to look much further than the case of Danny Masterson and how the rape survivors were clearly bullied and intimidated into not into not coming forward, you don't need to look much further than those cases to understand what happens to the mentality of somebody that has been brutalized and victimized in such a way. To understand that that is the core of why they don't come forward. They are terrorized. They don't feel supported. And in the case of somebody like Nora, there's been literally people, okay, despite what you think about her, the fact of the matter is she's somebody in deep mental distress. She's not been, as a result of all this abuse, she's not been somebody of sound mind, but there's literally been people that have honed in on that and added to that targeted harassment and abuse of her. And what do you think that does to her will, to her desire, and to her ability to actually come forward and get justice and hold the people that are attacking her and her children accountable? Well, it destroys it. The fact that we have not seen somebody like Anthony D'Amato get held accountable for all these years is because, quite frankly, there has not been that love and support for those victims. That's just a fact. You can do with that what you will, but that's just an absolute stone cold fact. In fact, it's actually been ridiculed and made as if it's an entire clown show. I can't tell you how utterly disgusting and saddening that is. It does not matter what you think about Nora. It does not matter what you think about her particular takes on the issue of a mother and her children getting targeted and even losing her means of survival, her income as a result of this abuse. That is sufficient to stand up and help provide the support needed to hold anybody, whether it be Anthony D'Amato or any other perpetrator, accountable. And it's unfortunate that that is such a prevailing mindset in this particular movement, but we know who those people that are behaving in such a fashion are. And rather than focusing on putting that energy into further criticizing these people, I think it is far more constructive to actually focus that energy into what you can do. Actual actions to move forward rather than continue to put the linchpin down on the past. That does not help those victims, and it does not, and especially does not help the children of those victims. And it's particularly common, unfortunately, from communities where there have been people who have been victimized so brutally. That is unfortunately a very particular pattern where there's not much love and support for them, and a lot of stuff slips through the cracks. And so I wanted to bring that up because it's imperative. It helps put not only this case, but many other future movement in this community, and overall the growing environment that is basically crime is legal motive that is going on in our country today, that you need to understand that you cannot have that accountability unless you come together on those issues of supporting the victims and making sure that those victims come forward. Because remember, if people in the Danny Masterson case did not come forward, there would no be any prosecution of Danny Masterson. And we know that just based on how the government works in these particular areas, and how that issue has gone on for so long, where these perpetrators have gone on scot-free. And so I just felt like I needed to make a mention of that. And that's pretty much all I had for this stream. And so with all that being said, I'll see if anybody has any questions and see what we got. Let's see. Questions here. Different channels here. Bear with me just a moment. All right. Yeah, somebody was talking about Chad Bianco. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of I've gotten quite a bit of number of tips on Chad Bianco and some other nonsense that's happened in Riverside. So um, this is a good segue into many of the other tips that I've got for stuff happening in Riverside County. Um, so it's a good way to debut and definitely make myself known to Riverside that I'm watching them. I'm watching them, uh, and they're very credible bits of information too. So I look forward to it. Um, see. I personally did not know Stacy. No, she died over 25 years ago, so there was no way I could have known her. Um, all right, well, that's all I got for you guys. Is next time, I think I'll do maybe another stream explaining the suit, but frankly, there's nothing much else to explain about it. In the meantime, the case is there if you want to read it. You can check out my YouTube post, and yeah, I think I put it on the, yep, it's definitely on the YouTube post, and then I also posted it on Twitter. So yeah. Uh, seems strange that I don't know the person. Well, you don't have to know the person. This isn't a negligence suit, right? This is not a tort. This is a public records of mandate suit to compel the Riverside County to hand over routine police records. You don't have to have personal connection to anybody that you are submitting a records inquiry for to file that suit. That is, first of all, not at all a requirement. And second of all, if that was a requirement, you would quite literally not see many cases ever brought forward in the first place. So that's just a ridiculous that's just a ridiculous and pointless statement. And if you actually were listening, I explained who her family was. Her family will never actually seek any justice for her because her family is Kendrick Moxon. That's her father. Her father is the infamous leader of litigating, harassing attempts to silence and suppress critics. She will never get justice. She will never get justice. The best that any of us could do to get justice is fighting for the release of these records and then handing over those records to the FBI to prosecute. That is the end goal here. To have these records made available and then turn it over to the only agency that would be actually willing to prosecute this matter at this point. Because I sincerely doubt the DA of Riverside County gives a damn. The only agency at this point actually capable of prosecuting, because the good news is capital offenses like murder do not have a statute of limitations. So getting those records would give great ammunition to federal prosecutors to go after, whether it be just Riverside County or if it's a combination of Riverside County sheriffs and the and Scientology. That is the ultimate reason why. In addition, of course, to having the world finally see what they're entitled to, finally put to rest what actually happened here and the people involved. That is the ultimate end all be all for. That's the ultimate mission for that I'm trying to accomplish with this suit. It's not about me. I just happen to really like submitting public records requests. Some of the more recent ones you can actually see for things that people have been talking about, and we suspect it, but there hasn't been records to prove and support the claim. And it's, although it seems silly, it's actually very important. In Los Angeles City Hall, people constantly get their public comment chopped off. And there has been constant claims about, well, we use a software to randomize the list of names. And even the deputy city attorney, as well as the council members, have admitted that they use this tool. But yet, when I contacted and made a records request, and I was very specific in my wording to the custodian of those records, which is actually the IT department, the ITA, as it's called in Los Angeles, Information Technology Agency, they came forward with records that clearly showed that, in fact, they are lying and falsely and deliberately doing so. And so that is how, at the end of the day, when people, whether it be prosecutors from the government or people that individually want to bring forward civil suits, you need those records to be able to successfully prosecute and meet your burden of proof. And so hopefully this is all going to aid in that long-term mission of getting what I believe to be a capital offense in this case, which is this poor soul was murdered. And I believe these records will help in getting justice for her, regardless of what your opinions of me are or any other personal reflections you might have. It's imperative that this gets support, that people will show up and attend. And I hope that many of you can. I'm in the process right now of getting a media pass for the first hearing so that I can live stream it, so that people who cannot be there in person can still see it. But I know quite a number of people, especially ones that have firsthand knowledge of this incident, actually do live somewhat close by to Riverside County, and I hope to see those people there because your presence does mean quite a bit. And so I hope that addresses that aspect. But with that, I'm going to close it there. I'll leave you guys to that, and maybe I'll make another one explaining the suit again, but I think this did a pretty good job of putting it all together. Really, the only thing I would have to talk about next is the reply that the county makes in the next 30 some odd days before the December 8th hearing. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time and support. Appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.